Hello everybody, my name is Gabriel Dusil. I am the General Manager and co-founder of Adel Ecosystem Limited. I'd like to answer a few questions here for Smile Expo to the up and coming Blockchain Bitcoin Conference in Helsinki, Finland. So let's start. Overly simplistic view is to look at cryptocurrency as just an alternative form of payment. That's one of the ways that we see cryptocurrency playing a role in retail services and merchant services around the world. More and more merchants are looking at cryptocurrency as an alternative form of payment. So that is one aspect that we're seeing in terms of the modern economy. But we don't see, for example, that cryptocurrency is going to be replacing fiat anytime soon. And we don't actually believe that that cryptocurrency will ever replace fiat. It'll find a role in commerce, but they will both play hand in hand. And I want to talk about that in a later question as well. But if we look at it a little bit more specifically, I would say that the crypto opens the doors for developing countries to access the developed world. We have a lot of individual citizens in the developing countries that don't have access to banking, they don't have access to the internet, and they don't have access to international fund transfers, for example. And of course, the internet gives them access to the world in terms of communications, and crypto extends that in terms of commerce. So we see that the developing countries really have access to a much broader communication with the developed world with the ability to use cryptocurrency as a funding mechanism. And if we looked at, let's say, cryptocurrency from a disruption perspective, then we see that cryptocurrency is definitely going to be disrupting middlemen in terms of the financial supply chain, whether it's the brokers, merchants, payment processors, intermediary banks, central banks. As we all know, cryptocurrency removes all these middlemen from the equation and just has individuals communicating back directly amongst themselves. Now we have new middlemen in the crypto space. We have new exchanges, crypto exchanges, which act as middlemen. But generally speaking, we can say that the financial supply chains as we know it in the fiat space are definitely going to be disrupted. And we see that the financial community in fiat are raising their eyebrows to see how to play a role in this crypto space, because they're starting to realize that there may be a big disruption in their space. Finally, I would say to round off this question is a more utopian view of how crypto will play a role in the future of society. And this is really beyond the financial industry itself, and that is really how blockchain can disrupt the database flow of information and the openness of information, and how blockchain can really improve humanity and society in the transparency of sharing data. So we see that there's a lot of upside for blockchain and cryptocurrency, not only in the financial space, but also in the overall virtual markets that we'll talk about in a few seconds. This is actually a good question, and whether we actually need legislation for Bitcoin in the first place. We believe that regulation will have a role to play in cryptocurrency, and there's several reasons for this. Of course, the crypto anarchists and the technical libertarians aren't very happy about regulation in the crypto space because of the ideology of decentralization and no centralized control. But we think that in order to really legitimize this crypto space into brick and mortar and the real world, there has to be some sense of regulation. Ultimately, regulation is, from our perspective, a balance of innovation, job creation, and protection of citizens. So each political regime, depending on which part of the world you're residing, it will depend on what type of regulation would apply. For example, in the capitalist approach, what we're trying to do is to mitigate monopolies. We want to have private ownership. We want to have healthy competition. And already that is a challenge in the crypto space, because we do have the notion of monopolies in crypto, especially in the Bitcoin blockchain, where there are about 5 miners, let's say, that control the mining aspects of Bitcoin blockchain. And that's why new blockchains are coming out in order to mitigate that risk with other types of proof mechanisms, proof of stake, for example, instead of proof of work. And there's a whole bunch of other ones as well. So in other types of systems, let's say in a social capitalist, is not only about the capitalist approach to mitigating monopolies, private ownership, and competition, but it's also in the protection of citizens, because capitalism, as we've seen, has a notion of corruption and may not have the best interest of citizens in play. And we've seen in many countries that are socialist and capitalist, they have this notion of protecting the citizens, the well-being of citizens, as an important aspect to their regulatory frameworks. So again, it comes down to really which country has which political system, and then how that political system would then regulate the crypto space. I'm personally not an economist. I'm not a social economic expert in any means, so this is just really a layman's view from a cryptocurrency sphere perspective. So we definitely think that cryptocurrency will play an important role in regulation, and we also see that if we want to legitimize various types of cryptocurrencies into brick and mortar and the real world, then we need regulation. Because what happens is that if we don't really have a regulatory framework in this space, then we almost stick the cryptocurrency sphere into the corner of the darknet, into a very niche corner, and it may just reside there untouched and frowned upon by the real world. But if we want to bring cryptocurrency into a legitimacy, then regulation will likely need to play a role there for the reasons that I mentioned. So an interesting aspect to looking at the evolution of cryptocurrency is really looking at how money evolved. And again, I'm not an expert in this space, so let me bear with me when I kind of look at this from a fairly layman perspective. And the first abstraction that I'd like to talk about is the barter system, right? So the barter system is really from the dawn of man, where somebody had a cow and somebody had a weapon, and they traded one for another because they were both experts in their own field, so they traded goods for another good. And it wasn't until the Bronze Age, so let's say 3000 BC, when gold started to be used as a trading mechanism. Somebody recognized that in the ground there's this beautiful gold rock, and it somehow becomes valuable to people. So it becomes a trading mechanism as an asset, as a monetary asset for trading goods for now this gold rock. And of course the scarcity of gold increases its value, and that's kind of some of the foundations of the theory of money. Sometime around 600 BC, a king decides, oh, this is this monetary asset gold, why don't I put my face on it, stamp it into a coin, and now, maybe for reasons of ego, who knows, that becomes now the currency for trading. So it's not only just a weight in gold, but it's also the coin itself with the king's face on it. And of course people would take bits of that coin. So you see historical coins that are kind of mutilated because people would just take chunks of it if they needed a fraction of the coin in order to trade, right? So where did we go from there? So the next abstraction layer is replacing gold with paper, and this apparently happened with the Knights Templars around the Crusades, around the 1000 AD, 1000 to I think around 1050 AD was the introduction of paper in replacement for gold. So it was a letter of credit, let's say, where instead of having a merchant travel across a continent with all their gold assets in the trailer, and that can be potentially stolen by bandits, the Knights Templars give them a piece of paper, say, okay, we will protect your gold in our repository, and this piece of paper is representation of that gold, and therefore you can use it when you come back, or when you go to another country, our subsidiary there will honor that piece of paper, and you can get your gold in the destination. So that's almost a first iteration of where paper money comes from. And paper evolves sometime around the 7th to the 11th century AD, where this letter of credit then merges into a national currency. So then we skip into the next abstraction, where in 1971, President Nixon decides to not have their American dollar connected to gold. So now we've separated the American dollar from gold in 1972, and for the first time in the American history, at least, the American dollar is not tied to gold, and therefore the trust of the American dollar is not towards the a direct connection to gold as an asset, but trust in the government in issuing that currency in 1972 onwards. Okay, so then the next abstraction, and now we have, of course, governments which are now overseeing this paper money, but it's not connected to gold anymore. And Satoshi Nakamoto, of course, from the housing crisis of 2006 and 7 and 8, he drafts a white paper inventing Bitcoin, and essentially removing the government and central bank control over currency, and ultimately creating cryptocurrency. So in a sense, we've almost come full circle to the tribal societies of the barter systems, but now we have a tribal society in the virtual space, in cryptocurrency space, where different blockchains are saying, okay, my blockchain is better than your blockchain, my cryptocurrency is better than your cryptocurrency. So you have this tribal behavior in the crypto space. And as I mentioned before, it would be important if we're to legitimize cryptocurrency into the brick and mortar world. It's going to be important that we work together, not in this tribal society, but more in a multi-stakeholder, multi-ownership governance, so that we can raise the level of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and blockchain into the real world and brick and mortar space. And ultimately, if that can help humanity and society improve, then we've done a good job as crypto proponents. Okay? We talked about this a little bit, but I think that we can safely say that cryptocurrency has disrupted the industry, the financial industry. One of the foundations of cryptocurrency is really to remove middlemen. Right? So whether it's the middlemen of intermediary banks, almost every single middleman, including the banks, all in that supply chain, are removed, because of course we just have two individuals communicating between themselves and trading cryptocurrencies. But we know, practically speaking, that's not the case anymore. We have exchanges that are acting as middlemen. We have other types of services that are being created in order to ease the implementation of blockchain in the financial space, which act as crypto middlemen, so to speak. So we're not entirely removing middlemen. Maybe we're removing middlemen from the standpoint of fiat currencies, but we're not removing middlemen entirely because we're creating new ones. So it's also probably safe to say that crypto is in the thorn in the side of the financial industry, but at the same time, it's really only a speck of sand in this bigger picture of the beaches of derivatives and other types of commodities that exist in the world. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies still as a fraction of size, but it's still a thorn in the side of the financial industry, and it's enough of a thorn in order to create the attention of the financial industry to see cryptocurrency as an opportunity. We see, I think, Goldman Sachs just recently is looking at cryptocurrency from a trading perspective. You know, as much as we're seeing some bad news about Google, Facebook, Twitter not wanting to do crypto ads, we don't see that as a message that says that these companies don't like crypto. They're blocking it clearly from the fraud that is existing a lot in these advertisements, and they don't want to have fraud on their platforms. So we don't see it that blocking ads means that these companies don't want to do crypto. We just see that they don't want to promote illegal activities. So, you know, we still anticipate that some of these companies may actually be supporting the transaction of cryptocurrencies in the future. So I think that's an important message as well. But we shouldn't really be restricting ourselves just to the financial sector in terms of disruption. We've talked about how cryptocurrency and blockchain is going to disrupt multiple industries, whether it's logistics, healthcare, manufacturing, government, information, technology, communications, Internet of Things. Almost every industry has a proof of concept that is looking at how cryptocurrency can potentially change the industry, their specific industry. But also these proof of concept implementers are realizing that it's not just about the technology. I mean, technology is, let's say, 20% of the picture, and then there's the implementation, which is the 80%, and that's where the effort is. So even if we use that 20-80 rule as a benchmark of failure and success, even if 20% of all these tens of thousands of proof of concepts succeed in crypto, then we still believe it's going to be a phenomenon. An interesting question is really around the creation of these national cryptocurrencies. Estonia is a good example that they've created their own cryptocurrency. And how does that play out in this global crypto sphere, relation to other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and the other thousands of cryptocurrencies that exist? Ultimately, we believe that governments aren't necessarily endorsing anonymity. They're likely not endorsing the decentralized nature in terms of no centralized control, no centralized bank control, because ultimately they're creating a centralized currency, a centralized cryptocurrency in the sphere of a decentralized crypto infrastructure ecosystem. So what's going to be interesting is how governments control their cryptocurrency in light of the other cryptocurrencies that exist in that ecosystem. Will the currency be tradable with other cryptocurrencies? Will it be controlled in terms of being listed in other crypto exchanges, and therefore will it float in the crypto exchanges freely, or will it be completely controlled in terms of value by the government entity and have a separate closed blockchain only for the citizens of that country? So there's a lot of uncertainties at the moment of how this cryptocurrency, this national cryptocurrency, will play out. Another aspect that's really probably clear from a banking perspective, from a centralized control perspective, is that governments want their citizens to pay taxes, right? So how would this cryptocurrency be regulated in order to ensure that capital gains tax will be paid using this cryptocurrency, and how it will be utilized in terms of e-government commerce, in terms of interacting with the government electronically and using that cryptocurrency to pay for taxes or pay for other types of government services. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out in the future. We don't believe that cryptocurrency is going to replace fiat anytime soon, or probably ever. And I think one of the aspects how we can look at that is really how other technologies have played a role in improvement of society and have disrupted various different industries. For example, we could look at email never replaced postage. We could say that Skype never replaced long distance phone calls. We could say that television never replaced movies, if we want to go back to the 50s, for example. Mobile technology didn't replace landline phones. Online shopping didn't replace going to the stores. So there's many examples where, whether it's the internet or mobile technology or any type of new technology, didn't necessarily replace the incumbent technology. We could even say that, for example, electricity hasn't replaced candles. It did. We still use candles, not in the same capacity as using it for light, example. So we could even go back 150 years. But what is clear is that these technologies do disrupt the incumbent industry, and certainly cryptocurrency is at the moment disrupting the financial industry, which is hundreds of years old, and that's an amazing feat considering that cryptocurrency is only 10 years old, and it's arguably we can say that cryptocurrency is really only 5 years old because of the creation of Ethereum and other types of blockchains that started really in 2013. So that's only 5 years old. So in such a short span of time, cryptocurrency has disrupted the financial industry and other types of industries, and we don't think it's happened because of the technology itself. We believe it's happened because of the ideology that crypto has created. The ideology of no centralized control, anonymity, no big brother, and decentralized ownership, and other types of aspects to the ideology that really has fueled this movement of endorsing a currency that is not controlled by a central entity. And we are a incubator for blockchain innovation using a community-based model. So what that means is that we are incubating ideas within a community. The community works together in order to, in a wiki process, to develop the idea. We call that idea incubation. We take the idea and formulate the idea using the expertise of the community, as well as a funding review committee that we have within the Adel staffing and the Adel services. And then when ideas become popular, they move into the project planning stage. And in the project planning stage is really the business plan to develop that idea into a project. Now in terms of creating the business plan so that there's a structured approach, so that when the community then goes to a vote and decides on voting for that project, they would then proceed to fund that project and then have a profit participation in that project moving forward. And then after it becomes funded, that it then moves into the execution stage, or the enterprise execution stage that we call it. So there's 3 stages. There's idea incubation, there's project planning, and then there's enterprise execution. And all that is within this community-based model. And we are using what we call an Adel wiki, so a wiki tool, in order to have a collaborative document creation process, so that we can track the changes of individual contributions, and we have admins that would agree to the additions and the contributions of various members within that incubation process, and they get recognized for their contributions as well. So where there is no expertise, for example, or there's a lack of expertise within the members themselves in terms of the incubation, then we would use the funding review committee and the expertise within the funding review committee as the layer that helps to supplement the expertise that is needed. Maybe it's in the financial side, maybe it's in marketing, maybe it's in sales, maybe it's in operations, maybe it's in development. So we would bring in the expertise needed in order to finish the business plan and also help out in the idea incubation. So we believe this is quite a unique model in terms of bringing communities together. We saw this opportunity because in the blockchain space there's a lot of communities and there are a lot of ideas. So we felt it was a unique opportunity to really utilize a community-based model for incubation, because typical models are using a venture capital approach, and we saw that as really like an us and them scenario, where venture capitals were on the other side of the negotiation table, and then you have the entrepreneurs with the idea, and they're kind of playing a chess match in terms of how much money they're going to get versus how much percentage of the company they're going to give in return. Whereas in a community-based model, there's no chess match between two sides. Everybody's playing together in order to increase the success of the project, to maximize the success of the project as a collective. So we have 14 projects right now that we're incubating at the moment. And we are looking at 2 flagship projects. One is called iFin, which is a decentralized crypto exchange. Decentralized crypto exchange is different from a lot of the exchanges that exist right now, because in a decentralized exchange, the traders keep their own private key, so they own their own account and they use their own private key in order to facilitate the trades, whereas in a centralized exchange, as we know, you actually give that private key over to the centralized exchange. So there's that central point of failure, which of course doesn't make sense in the ideology of cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency and the cryptosphere is supposed to be decentralized, and an exchange, a centralized exchange, is a centralized point of failure on top of this decentralized ecosystem. So it completely defeats the purpose of the decentralized nature and the decentralized ownership. So in a decentralized crypto exchange, or we're calling it DCX, or it's also known as DEX, or decentralized exchanges, but we like to call it a DCX because we want to differentiate decentralized exchanges from decentralized crypto exchanges. We think that decentralized crypto exchanges is the future of trading. So look forward to iFin being rolled out this year. You can get more information on our website, which is adel.io, ADEL.io, or on the iFin website, which is ifin.io, and you can get some information there. You can subscribe to our newsletter. So what are we going to cover at the Bitcoin Blockchain Conference in Helsinki, held by Smile Expo? So we're going to take a very unique look at the crypto sphere. We want to kind of take a different spin from other types of presentations in how we look at the crypto sphere, not only how it's developed until now, but really how we're going to see crypto impacting society and the virtual space moving forward. We want to cover 3 aspects to the presentation. Don't want to give away too much here, but we want to talk about the borderless citizen and what this means to global society, and how this global citizen, crypto citizen, is going to be playing out in terms of their role in the crypto sphere. We also want to look at what decentralized governance means in the crypto space. We often consider government and governance as a bad term in crypto, but what you'll see from this presentation is that there is governance in crypto. It just has taken a completely different shape in the crypto sphere, and what governance means in crypto is completely different than what it means in the real world. So what does governance mean in crypto, and how is it going to evolve into the future in order for us to legitimize this space? And the last thing we want to talk about is the virtual state. What is a virtual state? What is the existence of the borderless citizen in the crypto sphere, and how will they exist in this virtual reality space into the future? Maybe it's a little bit science fiction, but we want to explore a little bit into the future of how crypto will evolve in the next 10 to 20 years. So look forward to our presentation on the 25th of May in Helsinki, and we look forward to seeing you there.